It's a pretty much similar pilot position, and this is the skirt shift device, which you can push to either side, and it banks the craft by lifting up the skirt on whichever side you direct it to. Right. This is the throttle and pitch control, so that's about 15 degrees forward pitch and comes back through a neutral zone and then goes back into reverse pitch.
Okay.
And the motorcycle type throttle, so you have to adjust.
Okay.
If you're pulling a lot of pitch and you come off pitch, you have to decline the throttle or it might overtemp or overspeed the gas turbine.
Okay, so you have to manually prevent overspeed.
It's kind of one of these.
Okay.
Patting your head and rubbing your stomach. And then this is the elevator control.
Okay.
There's also ballast switches and various things like that for shifting the center of gravity around on the craft.
Elevator control, I presume you kind of set it and forget it?
Pretty much. Once you've got your main craft configuration set up, you can play with an elevator, but it's not a very effective aerodynamic device for this craft.
Right.
So.
Not a very big control surface.
Yeah. And then that's where the radar set goes, usually a Decca 914 big ship's radar set.
Okay.
And then we've got our seating back here for 38 passengers, which is, normally in British terms, 3 British-sized people and 2 British-sized people.
Okay.
Americans, not so much.
Yeah.
Fuel tank's right behind that back bulkhead. There's also a sign, which you'll see back at the museum, that you're traveling on the famous hovercraft that did the Amazon run and all that.
Okay.
And when we got this craft, the sign wasn't there. And of course, when I originally did my training, this is the first craft I ever drove. And then it was the craft I soloed in and worked as passenger servant on the Isle of Wight from Ryde to South Sea. And basically, that sign was on the back bulkhead, and it wasn't when we received the craft from Canada. And there's a story that at some later stage, someone had buried that sign in their back garden. It was dug up and returned, I think, through the Hovercraft Museum. And basically, we now have the sign in our office down at the museum. And in due course, when we can do something with this old girl, it'd be nice to reattach it back onto the bulkhead.
That came off of this one, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Great story about that sign. Yeah. So we'll picture that.
What's the vintage of this?
It's probably about 1966.
Okay.
Maybe 1967.
And this is which hull number?
2012, Golf Hotel 2012.
Okay.
Which isn't the hull number, but it's the registration number.
Okay.
And as I say, it has a huge meaning to me because, as I say, when I went to be a hovercraft pilot, this is the first craft I operated. It was the first craft I trained on. I soloed on this craft. And to think, after all this time,
this very
hovercraft, which has made its way almost around the globe, up in the Canadian Arctic, and ended up in a heap on a dock in Port or Prince Rupert, probably headed for a landfill eventually. But the fact that it wended its way down to Bellingham to our museum to join the SK5 that we've got, the sole surviving patrol air cushion vehicle from Vietnam, it's pretty amazing and pretty unique. And at one point my father, who was a career naval aviator, fighter pilot, transport pilot, flying boat, amphibian, suggested it'd be great fun for him to come over and do the course just for the fun of it, which he did.
Yeah.
And he trained on this craft, and he soloed on this craft. And so, I mean, it's just marvelous. And
there's a great personal connection.
Yeah, a huge personal connection. And of course, the fame of the craft itself, being the Amazon craft, is pretty significant. And I'm really concerned that we can't do better by it at the moment in terms of having a better situation for it, but these things are expensive even when they're not operating.
Right.
And the best we can say is that we're preserving it. We've got all the canvas off. We'll be putting new canvas on for this coming winter. So the craft is actually being maintained to the extent that it's not deteriorating, and so forth.
Right.
And eventually, who knows what'll happen? We'll continue to have high hopes that we can do something with this.
We'll find a generous benefactor.
That would be good. Or the old lottery or something.
Yep.